At the time of writing this video, Star Trek has a total of 11 series released so far, with another 2 or 3 in development. Each series is unique in its own way and will appeal to different kinds of people. If you ask Star Trek fans today what their singular favorite Trek series is, the answer you will probably hear most often is Deep Space Nine. One might call that show the fan favorite out of all Star Trek series, but why might this be? What aspects of the series give it the most appeal to so many people? Let's take a look at what sets this show apart. This video will contain major spoilers for the series, by the way. Star Trek Deep Space Nine originated as a spin-off of the then-ongoing Star Trek The Next Generation. As such, certain characters and concepts are carried over from TNG. Miles O'Brien becomes a central character, and many stories involve his family as well. Worf also joins the cast from the 4th season onward. Deep Space Nine expands upon species like the Bajorans, Ferengi, Trill, and Cardassians, all of which were initially introduced in TNG but never got as much of a story focus. Even some concepts from the original series, most notably the Mirror Universe, make an appearance as well. What people really seem to like the most about Deep Space Nine is how it's all about what makes something like the United Federation of Planets possible, that being diplomatic relations between different worlds and species. In doing so, it also reveals that the Federation is not completely flawless or utopian, but its values are still worth upholding. Critics of the series, or at least of its premise, question how Deep Space Nine can be a Star Trek series when it is primarily set on a space station rather than a starship and therefore they don't go anywhere, supposedly removing the element of Trek from Star Trek. However, I and many others find Deep Space Nine, both the series and the station itself, appealing because the station acts as a sort of anchor amidst all the comings and goings of space travel. Additionally, by not having to focus on going so many different places as would a series set on a constantly traveling starship, the series can focus a bit more on its characters. At the same time, both the Federation and the audience are introduced to the Gamma Quadrant and many of its worlds and species for the first time. Of course, Deep Space Nine is a military outpost, which is an apt location to set a narrative about war. The concept of war had been explored in Star Trek previously, but Deep Space Nine sees the Dominion War through from beginning to end, from the initial discovery of the Bajoran wormhole to the surrender of the Dominion. That's actually another thing that many viewers find appealing about Deep Space Nine, the serialization. The original series was almost entirely episodic, and The Next Generation did have some arcs which lasted about a season or so, but Deep Space Nine's overarching plot is the same through all of its 7 seasons. Of course, being blessed with 7 seasons, each having around 26 episodes, Deep Space Nine had plenty of time to put the overall story briefly on hold and develop its characters in other ways. Despite being about a war, Deep Space Nine's narrative upholds Star Trek's overall anti-war message. When the Federation first makes contact with the Gamma Quadrant, their intent is peaceful, simply wanting to explore and make connections with the species who lived there. It was the Dominion who had violent intentions, and the Federation was forced to fight back in order to protect its citizens. Conflict is not always avoidable as long as there are those who would wish to inflict harm solely for their own gain. Another point of praise for Deep Space Nine is that its characters are some of the best written and developed in the entire Star Trek franchise. A good example is the main character, Benjamin Sisko, being a black single father, a role which did not have very much positive representation on television at the time. The show also celebrates Black culture, with Ben and his father Joseph being passionate about preparing traditional Creole and Cajun food, and the series doesn't shy away from discussing and even depicting anti-Black racism. There's also Odo, who has a strong sense of justice and believes in upholding it over anything else. Kira Nerys sometimes feels divided between her loyalties to Bajor and to the Federation, wanting the best for her homeworld but wondering whether it's ready for membership and what that would mean for their culture. Garak was exiled from Cardassia, yet finds new people that he feels more at home with on the station. Julian Bashir was forced to carry a dark secret all his life, yet his peers still accept him for who he is when the information gets out. Jadzia Dax incorporates the experiences of her past lives into her present one while asserting her own sense of self, and Ezri Dax later does the same. Quark comes to learn that the pursuit of profit is not the only meaningful thing in his life. Deep Space Nine's characters have some interesting dynamics with one another. Rivalries and unlikely friendships alike are formed, and differing viewpoints often require compromise. Many of the characters are also queer-coded, with examples being Jadzia's continued attraction to Lenara, the mirror universe counterparts of Kira and Ezri, and the relationship between Bashir and Garak, which both characters' actors agree has elements of queerness. Deep Space Nine also portrays different ideals in very nuanced ways. Many of the main characters carry trauma from their pasts, but they are shown understanding when they can't easily forget their experiences, and they're not depicted as being over-emotional or anything because of it. The show also portrays religion in a positive way, which isn't usually expected from the sci-fi genre. With the Bajorans' religion in particular, it gave their lives meaning, gave them as a people a sense of unity during the Cardassian occupation, and remained something that the occupiers could not take away from them. The Founders can be seen as a metaphor for the cycle of abuse, once being outcasts themselves and then in turn reinforcing those experiences onto others by forming the Dominion and subjugating others to their rule. Speaking of the Founders, Odo's regard toward them displays how loyalties can form, since Odo felt more connected to his found family on the station than his own species whose values he didn't agree with. In the end, even though it's because they needed his help, the other changelings finally opened themselves up to listening and understanding his perspective. Deep Space Nine isn't perfect, of course, and a few of its narrative decisions were questionable. It was the series to introduce the infamous Section 31, whose actions seem to contradict the values of the Federation. I'll make a whole video on that someday. Another thing I didn't like is how in the episode Facets, Curzon admits to being in love with Jadzia as the reason he was so hard on her during her initiation, as opposed to a less creepy explanation such as her reminding him of some secret lack of confidence in himself. There was also the death of Jadzia Dax, which occurred because the show producer Rick Berman was extremely disrespectful towards the character's actress Terry Farrell. She wanted fewer episodes, but Berman and his fellows were unyielding. Instead of finding a fitting way to write her character out of the series or have her appear less frequently, she was instead killed off in a way that was very unflattering for the character, whereas her mirror universe counterpart was given a more heroic and dignified death even though it was only mentioned in dialogue. For the Prime Universe Jadzia, there are many ways she could have been written that would have given Farrell the flexibility she wanted. Even with its relatively few flaws, Star Trek Deep Space Nine is not only a great Star Trek and sci-fi series, but really an exemplary television series overall. No other Star Trek shows before or since have been quite like it, and its individual charm would be hard to match. As I said, every Star Trek series has its reasons to be admired, but Deep Space Nine is unique in many intriguing ways that hold up even decades later, and have made the series its own kind of classic. So what do you think of Star Trek Deep Space Nine? Do you agree with my points about it? What other aspects of the series do you think make it a fan favorite? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching this video. If you want more videos like this on Star Trek as well as other media, be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. Live long and prosper, and I'll see you next time.